You're still awake? That's all right. You're safe here. You found your way to the Lady Mythos. Here, we don't hurry, we linger, with stories the world tried to forget, with shadows that stretch across centuries, with kings who wore crowns and serpents as their burden. Before you drift off, if there's a story you'd like me to tell, or a place you're listening from, I'd love to know. Leave me a note anytime. It helps me picture the small circle we're all sitting in, even if we're scattered across the world. You, me, and the myths between us. Tonight, I want to tell you about Zahhak, a prince who listened to the wrong whisper, a king who carried serpents on his shoulders, and a name that became for Persians the very shape of tyranny. Chapter 1. The world that birthed a Serpent King. If we are going to talk about Zahhak, the king with serpents on his shoulder, the man whose very name became a symbol of tyranny in Persian memory, we first need to step back, far back, into the world that gave rise to him. A world where myth and history breathed the same air. This is not a fantasy land made for stories, but the very soil of ancient Persia, where mountains were seen as guardians, rivers as living beings, and fire as the breath of the divine. It was a place where every line of order, from the furrows in a farmer's field to the laws in a king's court, was understood as a reflection of something greater. The eternal struggle between Asha, truth and order, and Druj, the lie, the force of chaos. Picture the Iranian plateau, thousands of years ago. The air is dry, almost sharp in the lungs, tinged with dust, wild thyme, and the faint smoke of hearth fires. To the north, Mount Damavand rises like a watchful giant, its slopes dark with rock and snow, clinging stubbornly to its peak, even under the fiercest summer sun. That mountain would one day become the prison of Zahhak, bound by chains. But for now, it simply looms, an unspoken witness to all that unfolds. In the valleys below, barley and wheat grow in long golden stretches. The people have mastered the art of water. They cut narrow channels from the rivers, guiding streams into the fields, so that life can bloom in the shadow of the desert. Villages cluster along these waterways. Mud brick houses with flat roofs, cool courtyards shaded by pomegranate and fig trees, small shrines where women leave bowls of milk or a handful of grain at dawn, whispering prayers for protection. This was the world that preserved Zahhak's tale in the Shahnameh, the epic of the Persian kings, a world that did not separate legend from history, In its pages, kings and heroes live side by side, with demons and divine beings, because for the people who first told these stories, the visible and invisible worlds were always interwoven. A king in such a place was not just a ruler of men. He was the axis of the cosmos. His justice was the very balance on which the world turned. When he was righteous, rain came in its season. Markets bustled with trade. Roads were safe, and the land was at peace. When he failed, when greed or cruelty took hold, the world itself seemed to decay. Crops shriveled, rivers shrank, plagues spread through villages, and wolves prowled bolder at the edges of the fields. If you look toward the centers of power, you would see palaces rising above the plain, fortified halls lined with carved stone. But just as important were the fire temples, open sanctuaries where the sacred flames burned day and night. These fires were not mere symbols. They were the heartbeat of the kingdom, the visible presence of divine order. To let a fire die was to let truth itself falter. Kings themselves were marked by visible signs. Their crowns were shaped like the rising sun, a reminder of their role as bringers of light. Their thrones were raised high so that petitioners looked up, physically reminded of the gulf between mortal and monarch. Even clothing spoke of status. Patterned robes for the nobility, plain undyed tunics for farmers and shepherds. Authority was not just felt, it was seen in every thread, every gesture. Now, pause for a moment and think of serpents. Not the harmless garden snakes that slip across a field in silence, but the heavy, coiling image that ancient peoples carried in their minds. Across the Near East, serpents could be guardians, keeping treasure or sacred groves safe. But they were also feared as bringers of death and corruption. They shed their skins, seeming immortal. They struck without warning, and in myth, they often curled at the roots of the world tree, gnawing at creation itself. By the time Zahhak's story was first told, the sight of a serpent on a ruler's shoulders would not have been neutral. It would have screamed of corruption, of something deeply wrong with the order of things. But before Zahhak, there was balance. His father, Mythos, ruled before him, and the shahnameh remembers him as a kind and generous man. He gave freely to the poor, and in his reign justice was kept. Fields prospered, temples shone, and people spoke his name with gratitude. He was not a great conqueror, not a figure of blazing heroism, but he was a ruler who preserved Asha. And in stories like these, that is where myth always begins, with balance, and with the first cracks that break it. And so we turn to the young prince, Zahhak himself, before he was burdened with serpents, before his name was cursed. Imagine him in his father's palace, walking through cool courtyards, where channels of water glimmer in sun, their surface broken by drifting rose petals, banquet halls filled with the scent of roasted lamb, saffron rice, and honeyed dates, stables where sleek horses stamp and snort, their coats brushed until they shine. In the markets, he would have seen traders from Babylon, India, and beyond, bringing carved ivory, indigo dye, cinnamon, and stories of lands even further away. Here, in this richness, ambition can grow. What is enough for one man is never enough for another. And a prince who wants more freedom, more wealth, more power, will always find a voice ready to encourage him. And in Zoroastrian cosmology, there was always such a voice, Ahriman, the destructive spirit, the eternal adversary of Ahura Mazda, the god of light. Ahriman does not always come in the form of armies or storms. He is subtler than that. He whispers, he tempts, he appears as a trusted counselor, a skilled servant, a bearer of new knowledge. His gift is not terror at first, but curiosity, desire, a promise that seems harmless until it is too late. It is this voice that will find Zahhak, not as a demon in the shadows, but as a man who seems loyal, clever, and helpful. A man with a gift that will open the door to ruin. Before he enters, though, hold this world in your mind. A land where the king is the hinge between heaven and earth. A people who see the health of their crops as the measure of their ruler's soul. A culture where fire is sacred, mountains eternal, and serpents feared as a mark of decay. Into this world steps a young prince. His story will stretch from throne rooms glittering with gold to the dark slopes of Mount Damavand. And though his name will live for thousands of years, it will never be spoken as a hero's, but as a warning. The story of the Serpent King. Chapter 2. The Temptation of the Prince. In the shahnameh, evil does not arrive like a storm. Ahriman does not hurl himself against palace gates or shatter the skies with thunder. No, he enters in the quiet way that temptation always does. He comes clothed in the ordinary, disguised as opportunity, stepping into the life of a young prince who has not yet learned to guard his soul. It begins one morning in the palace courtyard. The sun is pale and golden, rising above the mud brick walls, catching on the fountains that trickle into shallow pools. Birds stir in the fig trees, and servants go about their work, sweeping the stone paths, scattering grain for doves, preparing for another day in the house of Mardos. At the gate, a stranger appears. He's not dressed as a noble or a soldier. His clothing is plain, but carefully kept, like that of a skilled tradesman. No gold embroidery, no iron armor, only a traveler's robe and the look of one who carries something worth protecting. And indeed, in his arms, wrapped in layers of cloth, is a bundle heavy enough to demand both hands. The guards stop him. "What do you bring?" they ask. The man bows with practiced humility. "I'm a cook," he says, "a master of flavors from distant lands. I have traveled far, and I bring with me new ways of preparing food, dishes your prince has never tasted." Now, in those days, the trade routes stretched wide across Asia. Spices crossed deserts and mountains. Caravans brought silk, ivory, and glass to Persian markets. Cooks did sometimes travel, seeking patrons in wealthy courts. And kings delighted in surprising their guests with foods strange and wonderful. So it was not unthinkable that such a man might arrive at the palace gate, promising new flavors. The guards, uncertain, carry the news to Zahhak. The young prince is curious. He is not yet burdened by the weight of ruling, not yet chained by the slow patience his father shows. To a restless youth, novelty is a gift. And so Zahhak agrees. "Bring him in," he says. The stranger is led into the courtyard. Before the prince, he kneels, then carefully unwraps his bundle. Out tumble strange and shining tools, bronze skewers, small grinding stones, a curved knife that flashes in the sunlight. From a pouch, he produces tiny parcels of spice. When he opens them, the air changes. The sharp brightness of coriander, the dusky sourness of sumac, the cool breath of dried mint. Scents so unfamiliar that servants pause in their work, heads lifted, nose twitching. This is not the simple fare of bread and yogurt, of lentils and onions. This is something new. He begins to cook. He rubs lamb with salt and herbs, slow cooks it until the meat sighs beneath the knife. He rolls dough thin as a sheet of parchment, lays it over hot stones until it blisters, brushes it with oil so it gleams. He splits dates, presses nuts inside, and sets them aside like jewels. The courtyard fills with smoke and fragrance, with warmth that curls into the corridors of the palace. When Zahhak tastes the meal, he's astonished. The flavors dance and clash, sweet against sour, spice against smoke. Compared to this, the palace's usual food tastes plain, almost lifeless. The cook watches quietly, smiling only a little, as a prince devours every bite. The next day, he returns with another dish, fish wrapped in fig leaves, seasoned with the deep, rich tang of pomegranate molasses. The day after that, roasted game glazed with honey and vinegar, the meat soft and shining. Day after day, dish after dish, the cook returns. Each time, Zahhak praises him. Each time, the man bows. Each time, the bond grows a little deeper. By the end of the week, the young prince looks forward to his arrival. Already, the seed is planted. Trust has been built. The voice of Ahriman has entered the court not through fear, but through pleasure. One evening, after the lamps have been lit and the dishes cleared away, the cook leans closer. His voice is soft, almost idle, as though they were two friends passing time. He speaks of the kingdom. He asks about Mythos, Zahhak's father. He wonders aloud about the prince's future. And then, as if tossing aside an unimportant thought, he says, "You are strong, my prince, stronger than most men. Your father is good, yes, but good men grow old. Kingdoms need youth. They need energy. They need new ideas." He doesn't press further. He doesn't demand or command. He lets the words hang in the air, like smoke from a dying fire. Zahhak does not answer, but he does not dismiss the thought either. The seed settles deeper into the soil. The next time they meet, the cook asks for something in return. For all he has given, a small favor, he says. "Let me place my hands on your shoulders, my prince, and give you a blessing." It is an odd request, but not a dangerous one, or so it seems. Zahhak, curious, agrees. The man places his hands firmly upon the prince's shoulders. For a moment, nothing. Then suddenly, a sharp pain, searing and bright, like hot iron pressing into flesh. Zahhak gasps, staggered, clutching at his chest. And then, beneath his collarbones, two shapes begin to rise. They swell quickly, breaking through the skin. Scales glisten in the lamplight. The shapes uncoil, lift their heads, and hiss. Two serpents, black as night, alive, and bound to him. Zahhak stumbles backward, clawing at them, but they cannot be torn free. They are a part of him now. The cook's smile deepens, and his voice is calm as ever. "They are yours, my prince. They will remain with you always, but they must be fed." It is here that the story lives behind the human and steps fully into the realm of myth. Serpents are not merely animals now. They are symbols, marks of corruption visible to all. A sign of the pact Zahhak has made, a curse written into his very flesh. The cook reveals himself. He's no simple tradesman, no wanderer seeking patronage. He is Ahriman himself, the destructive spirit who came in plain robes and gentle smiles. And the gift he has given is no gift at all. It is a demand. The serpents will eat nothing but the brains of young men. If Zahhak wishes to keep them quiet, If he wishes to live with them, he must begin a practice that will hollow out the heart of his kingdom. And so the slow whisper of temptation becomes an act that cannot be undone. The prince, who might have walked the path of a just king, takes his first irreversible step into ruin. From this moment forward, Zahhak will never be free. His shoulders bear not just serpents, but the burden of his choice. A choice that will bind his fate to darkness and transform him into the Serpent King. Chapter 3. The Throne Stained with Blood. By the time the serpents had settled on Zahhak's shoulders, the young prince's life was no longer his own. The palace, once a place of sunlight and courtyards of fragrant with rosewater, had become a prison of hissing. Morning and night, their whispers coiled in his ears. Their bodies pressed and shifted against his skin, restless and hungry. What had begun as a thrill of strange power now felt like a shackle. At first, Zahhak resisted. He was not yet ready to name himself cruel. When Ahriman told him what the serpents demanded, Zahhak's voice broke with desperation. Find another way. I will not kill my people for the sake of these abominations. But hunger is its own tyrant. The serpents' needs were not like the hunger of common beasts. They did not wait. They did not weaken. Their hunger was sharp, constant, gnawing, not only at the flesh, but at the mind. If left unfed, they writhed restlessly, scales scraping his skin raw. They hissed at night, so that even in sleep he dreamed of darkness, of coils tightening around his throat. Soon, exhaustion weighed heavier than his conscience. And so Ahriman gave his answer, smooth, patient, inevitable. My prince, he said, there is a cure for your torment. Each day, 2 men from the kingdom will be brought to you. The serpents will feed, and you will know peace. Zahhak wanted to believe it was temporary. He told himself this was only until another cure could be found. Only until the pain stopped. A bargain to buy time. But in the realm of myth, bargains will darkness never end as promised. The obstacle, of course, was his father. Mythos, the generous king, beloved by his people, would never allow such cruelty. And so Ahriman laid his trap. One morning, Mythos was invited to visit his orchards. They were the pride of the kingdom, where pomegranate blossoms burst open each spring like clusters of rubies. He went gladly, riding alone, thinking only of the fruit that glowed red against green leaves. He did not see the earth disturbed ahead, did not sense that the path had been tampered with. A pit yawned where solid ground should have been. His horse stumbled, and the king fell. By the time the dust settled, Mardos was gone, swallowed by the earth. When news reached the palace, shock filled the halls, but not resistance. Zahhak was the heir. He took the throne as easily as one might slip into an inherited robe. Outwardly, it was a smooth succession. Inwardly, the rot had already spread. For the Persians who first heard his tale, the meaning was clear. In Zoroastrian thought, a king was the guardian of Asha, truth and order itself. The death of a just ruler and the rise of one branded by serpents was more than political tragedy. It was a cosmic wound. With Mardos fell the order of the world. With Zahhak rose Druj. The lie, the corruption sown by Ahriman. The palace changed quickly. The bright courtyards of song and laughter became corridors of whispering fear. The fire temples still burned, but their light seemed dimmer, as if the sacred flame itself mourned. Every day, 2 young men were taken from their homes. Some families hid their sons in distant villages, scattering them like seeds on the wind. Others bribed guards, begged priests, offered sacrifices. It did not matter. The quota was kept. And yet, the kingdom did not collapse. Not at once. This is one of the unsettling truths of Zahhak's story. Evil does not always announce itself with ruin. Sometimes it wears the mask of order. Trade continued to move along the roads. The harvests were gathered. Markets still opened at dawn. From the outside, the life appeared unchanged. But beneath the surface, trust withered. Hope shrank. The soil itself seemed thinner, the rain less certain. The shahnameh's listeners would have understood this well. In their world, evil often arrived as a slow decay, not an immediate storm. A garden still looks green in the days after water is cut. Only later do the leaves curl and the stems dry. So it was with Zahhak's reign, to the eye, the kingdom still stood. But at its roots, it had already begun to die. Over time, even Zahhak ceased to speak of finding a cure. Feeding the serpents became routine, another part of palace life. The horror dulled into habit. Ahriman, satisfied, withdrew into silence. His work was done. The prince had become his own jailer. And yet, power taken through treachery is never secure. Rumors spread faster than soldiers. Beyond the walls of the palace, in villages and markets, in mountain strongholds and shepherds' huts, people whispered of the king with serpents on his shoulders. At first, the whispers were hushed, spoken with fear, but slowly they grew louder, and with them grew something more dangerous than fear, the spark of defiance. The reign of Zahhak had begun, but so had the story of those who would one day rise against him. Chapter 4: The Realm in Shadow. When a kingdom changes, the change is rarely felt in a single stroke. It doesn't crash down all at once like a fallen wall. It seeps in, slowly, almost invisibly, until the air itself feels different. In Zahhak's Persia, the change began with silences. A market stall closed before sunset. A shrine left without offerings. Villagers lowering their voices when riders passed through. Like the lengthening shadow of evening, his rule spread over the land. First subtle, then inescapable, until darkness covered everything. Leave the palace behind and follow the old caravan road east. The path twists between low hills where tamarisk trees grow, their thin pink blossoms attracting bees in spring, their dry branches rattling in the heat of summer. Shepherds still move their flocks across the scrubland, and farmers bend low over their barley fields. But the atmosphere has changed. Faces turn away when hoofbeats are heard. No one greets strangers with open hands anymore. The elders, once proud to meet in the village square to settle disputes, now gather indoors, speaking in cautious voices. Disagreement is dangerous. A single overheard word might reach the wrong ears. Where once the king's presence was felt as protection, now it presses down like a weight. Even the road themselves bear witness. Under Mythos, they were kept smooth and firm, a sign of royal care. Safe passages for pilgrims, for merchants, for farmers carrying grain to the market. But under Zahhak, the roads begin to crumble. Stones shift loose. Weeds creep from the edges. The neglect is subtle but telling. What once showed the king's watchful eye now shows his indifference. The feeding of the serpents becomes not just a horror, but a system. Every province is given its quota. 2 young men per day, names written carefully on clay tablets or inked onto parchment scrolls. The condemned are bound and marched under the guard to the capital, their families left behind in grief and silence. Some governors obey with grim precision. Others use the decree as a weapon, sending the sons of rivals while sparing their allies. Corruption grows like mold in the dark. Families do what they can. Some hide their children in mountain villages, scattering them like seeds beyond the king's reach. Others bribe the officials, substituting slaves, criminals, or the nameless poor in place of their sons. But the poorest, those who have nothing to trade, no one to plead for them, can only watch as their children are taken away. And yet, even here, The shahnameh speaks of resistance. Two of Zahhak's royal cooks, their hearts broken by the endless slaughter, find a way to save some of the condemned. Each time, they prepare the brains for the serpents. They mix in those of sheep, sparing one man, quietly, secretly. The survivor is smuggled away to the remote mountains. Over time, a hidden population of fugitives forms. Scattered families, young men who should have died, living beyond the edges of the kingdom's shadow. Like embers left under ash, they wait for a breath of wind to bring them back to flame. The fire temples still burn, their flames tended day and night. But even there, the change is felt. In Zoroastrian thought, the fire is more than warmth or light. It is the living presence of Asha, truth itself. Under Zahhak, the priests still keep the fire alive, but their words are careful, pared down to silence. They no longer preach of justice or the duty of kings. They no longer remind worshippers rulers must protect the world's balance. To speak too boldly would be to risk the king's wrath. Travelers who come to the temples notice it. Where once they heard music, drums, flutes, the chanting of prayers, now there is only the crackle of flame in the stillness. The light is there, but the joy is gone. Still, whispers find their way into every shadow. In the markets, under the awnings where merchants sell salt and saffron, in the shade of fig trees where old men gather, in the corners are caravanserais, where travelers share wine at night, the story of Zahhak is told in fragments. Some say the serpents are punishment from the gods, proof that the prince once defied the divine. Others whisper that they are a gift, a reward from Ahriman, the dark power who delights in ruin. Most agree on one thing: their king is no longer a man like other men. Caravans carry these whispers further. Merchants speak of him at the borders. And by the time the stories reach distant lands, they have become darker still. Tales of a ruler who feasts on human life, who bargained away his soul, who has lived for centuries and cannot die. In the Shahnameh, Zahhak's reign stretches not for years, but for centuries. In myth, time is elastic. It can race in a moment or stretch into ages. What matters is not the count of years, but the feeling. That this rule is endless, heavy, unbroken. A shadow that no wind seems strong enough to lift. People begin to believe it will never end. And yet, both history and myth whisper the same truth. No throne lasts forever. No shadow can hold back dawn. Somewhere beyond Zahhak's reach, in a place unknown to him, a child will be born. a child who carries the seed of his undoing. But for now, the world remains heavy with silence. The roads crumble, the fire temples burn low. The people speak only in whispers. And in the palace, the serpents sleep, their bellies full. The reign of Zahhak is secure. But far away, the first threads of resistance are beginning to weave themselves together. Threads that, in time, will become a banner. And that is where we'll leave Zahhak for tonight. The Serpent King seated on his throne, the roads crumbling, the fire temples dim, the people whispering in fear, his shadow stretching across centuries, heavy as stone. But shadows do not last forever. In the next episode, we'll climb into the mountains, where a hidden child grows strong, where a blacksmith raises his banner, and where the first sparks of rebellion begin to glow against the dark. Thank you for listening to the Lady Mythos. Sweet dreams and sleep tight. And when the night falls again, I'll be here, waiting to tell you the rest. Until then, good night.